Auckland might be out of lockdown, so why have some hospitality businesses chosen to keep their doors shut? Free or for a fee? Pharmacies are under fire for charging to print out vaccine passports, and Aussie kids are set to get jabbed in time for the new school year. Don't forget you can watch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50, and you can also catch us on Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The Prime Minister says the country is on track to meet the 90% double vaccination rate by Tuesday or Wednesday next week. All three of Auckland's district health boards are on track to meet a 90% vaccination rate by the time the border starts to open on December the 15th. And the government also announced this afternoon it secured 60,000 courses of Pfizer's antiviral medication, Paxlovid. It's expected to be delivered to New Zealand in April, once approved by MedSafe. Jacinda Ardern says Delta's transmissibility will mean more cases and more people recovering at home.
And so we must be as prepared as possible to support all of those individuals to get well soon. And so treatments are another way we can keep people safe and ensure that our hospitals maintain capacity.
However, Jacinda Ardern says prevention via vaccines and the traffic light system remain the best protection against COVID-19. 135 new COVID-19 cases have been reported today in Auckland, Waikato King Country and Canterbury. The Canterbury cases were announced yesterday but are being officially reported today. There are 4 new cases in Nelson Marlborough, which will be added to tomorrow's figures. 125 of the new COVID cases confirmed today are in Auckland. The new National Party leader, Christopher Luxon, has demoted one of his predecessors and promoted some new faces in his first caucus reshuffle. He says the lineup is based on merit and matches MPs to their strengths. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
Erica Stanford, Matt Ducey and Simeon Brown are the big winners, all boosting up the party rankings to the front bench. Former leader Judith Collins has plummeted down the party list to number 19 and has picked up a minor portfolio, science and innovation. Christopher Luxon says Ms Collins is very passionate about the area and it'll keep her busy. Another former leader, Todd Muller, is back in the fold after being booted out of caucus by Ms Collins. He's picked up the Oceans and Fisheries and Internal Affairs portfolios.
Parts of Wellington have had more rain today than they usually get for all of December. Flooding has affected roads and some houses, and the heavy rain is expected to continue until late tonight. The Met Service's Tui McGuinness says by mid-afternoon, the weather station in Kelburn recorded 85.8 millimetres of rainfall since 2 a.m.
To put that in perspective, normally in December, on average, our weather station would get 83.2. So we're already a couple of mils over what would be considered a normal December rainfall. And of course, we're still expecting as last, so that number is going to keep climbing.
Meanwhile, several cars have been damaged as a large car park in Lower Hutt flooded after the severe rain. The Hutt City Council advised people to retrieve their cars this afternoon from the Riverbank car park after the banks of the Hutt River burst. Wainuiomata resident Dylan Sims watched one rescue attempt.
So there's a few cars down the road a bit and it's like submerged underwater. And then I was here before where electric car was getting towed out and they started it and it blew up. There was no smoke or nothing, no fire, it just stopped working.
And a landslip in Wellington has suspended train services between Kandala and Johnsonville. A firearms incident in the Southland town of Winton appears to be under control. A police spokesperson said earlier today that a person had been injured and the local school and kindergarten were put into lockdown as a precaution. Police have declined to provide further details and will not say if anyone has been apprehended. In a social media post, Winton School said police advised it was safe to come out of lockdown at 2:30 and all children were released from school at the usual time. A US congressman has been heavily criticised after posting a Christmas family photograph posing with military-style rifles days after a deadly school shooting. Kentucky's Republican representative Thomas Massey tweeted the photo with a caption saying, "Santa, please bring ammo." Last week's school shooting in Michigan left 4 teenagers dead and 7 people injured after a 15-year-old student allegedly went on a rampage. It's 4 minutes past 5. The bitter rivalry between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton will go to a winner-takes-all final round of the Formula One Championship next weekend. Hamilton won today's chaotic Saudi Arabian Grand Prix after Verstappen was forced to give up the lead to Hamilton when stewards ruled he'd taken it illegally.
When they told me that I had the 5-second penalty, it was not worth fighting anymore because I would never pull a gap of 5 seconds. But at the end of the day, I don't want to talk about it too much because they don't deserve any word coming out of my mouth.
Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton are now tied at the top of the Drivers' Championship with one race in Abu Dhabi remaining. The governing body of tennis says it won't follow the Women's Tennis Association in suspending tournaments in China. The WTA has halted tournaments in the region because of ongoing concern for Chinese player Peng Shuai, who accused a top government official of sexual assault. The International Tennis Federation says the allegations need to be investigated, but the organisation will work behind the scenes on a resolution. The group trying to force the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron and Team New Zealand to defend the America's Cup in Auckland has dropped its demand for a special meeting of the Yacht Squadron to force the issue. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Despite abandoning the meeting, the group says it remains opposed to the Cup defence being held overseas. And that's the news.
History is made in Mumbai.
I think it's one of the greatest cricketing days of my life, and I think it probably will always be.
Holiday plans are derailed.
The more that we can sort of sit tight while we get our vaccination rates really high, the better.
And horse racing hits a hurdle.
We're competing enough now for the sporting dollar as it is, and we certainly don't need these things to happen.
Here and now, morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from mid-service to midnight Tuesday for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, also Gisborne. Partly cloudy with isolated showers. Bay of Plenty, cloudy with occasional drizzle. Clearing tomorrow morning, then a few showers from the afternoon. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country, Hawke's Bay and Waitangi. Rain with heavy falls, gradually easing tomorrow. Possible thunderstorms over central areas in the afternoons and evenings. Marlborough and Nelson, occasional rain with some heavy falls today. Rain clearing tomorrow evening. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mostly fine in Fiordland, but partly cloudy with a few showers elsewhere. Canterbury and Otago, cloudy with occasional drizzle, clearing inland Otago tomorrow morning and elsewhere tomorrow evening. For Southland, partly cloudy today, but fine for tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpointi tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's the equivalent of political snakes and ladders in National Party caucus reshuffle. Some MPs have taken a mighty slide, almost dropping off the board altogether. Former leader Judith Collins has gone from the number 1 spot down to 19. Only the top 20 in this new shadow cabinet are ranked. Rocketing up the career ladder are Chris Bishop and Erica Stanford, the party's immigration spokesperson, rising 18 spots. Other climbers are Simeon Brown and Matt Ducey. And of course, former leader Simon Bridges already scored finance in the number 3 spot. It is all about merit and matching people to their strengths, according to the party's newest leader, Christopher Luxon, and he joins us now. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How many debts did you pay off with this reshuffle?
Well, as I said from last Tuesday, we really want to make sure that we are using all the talents in this team, and there's some pretty incredible people, and we want to make sure they're joined up to the challenges that we've got for them in the portfolios where they've got the best experience and can make the biggest contribution, and it's a performance-based approach.
Yeah, but you're from business, right? Kill a few birds with one stone. So performance, yeah, but what about debts? Did you pay anyone back for favours offered to you in the leadership battle?
As I said to you, it wasn't about that. It was about ensuring that we do present the strongest possible team and lead into the next government and leverage the skills that are innately in that team.
Judith Collins, down to 19, and research, science and innovation. Is that really enough to keep her occupied?
Oh, look, Judith has had real passion for those subjects. She really has. If you noticed, even when she was leader, she had responsibilities for technology. And so I know she has a deep, deep passion for those areas, and she's really, very curious about that area, and she's going to be brilliant at it.
Yeah, but she was leader before, right? Managing 33 MPs, Pacific People's portfolio, national security, artificial intelligence and space. And, wow, she still managed to get herself into a bit of shtuck. So you know what they say about idle hands. Is that really enough to keep her occupied?
But look, Judah's going to make a great contribution on those subjects, absolutely.
Is she going to stick around?
That's a decision ultimately for Judah, but I think she's indicated that she is. So,
But is this part of you encouraging her out the door, ranked at number 19 with research and science as her portfolio?
No, as I said to you, we've got 33 people with a different set of skills. We have to assemble a very complementary team. And we're going to use the talents of all the people that are in the team. And Judith's got some incredible talents, some great experience, and she's most importantly passionate about those subjects.
Has anyone told you to your face that they aren't happy with what they got, or that they would prefer something else?
Well, the one-on-one conversations we had over the last week were about a fundamental reset and about using the skills of the team. Today has been really a series of conversations with people in the last few days about their portfolios and why I felt that they were well suited to the tasks that we've assigned to them. And, I'm sure there will be some disappointment at some level, but I can tell you, there's 33 people and we will use all of their skills. You will notice that I haven't ranked below 20, and it's a very deliberate decision because I don't think rankings, frankly, are that useful or very helpful. It's much more important that someone's performing a portfolio. They've got to oppose the government, but they've also got to propose ideas. They've got to communicate well with the public, and they've fundamentally got to engage with the industry, the community groups as well.
Would it be good to have a Pacifica MP that you could give the Pacific People's portfolio to?
Yeah, and to be honest, Lisa, that's what I've talked very publicly about from the beginning, is that the National Party, when it's at its best, is a national party, if you go back through our history, and that means we have deep connections into all communities across New Zealand. And the reality is, post the last election result, and as a midterm leader, that is something that, we haven't had as much diversity as we want and or need.
So if you need a refresh and a renewal, right, are there MPs in your party who you think should retire?
Those are decisions for individuals to make. We're 2 years out from an election and we've got a long way to go. And what our real focus in, and we're taking it week by week, is just really making sure we assemble the very best team that we can, we get the right people in their places, and then we really take the case to the government, but more importantly, come up with ideas for people in New Zealand. And I'm very,
these things take time. These things take time. To refresh your front line, to refresh your party takes time. You have to find replacements. You have to get your house in order. So you're a person who likes to plan ahead. Is there people within your caucus at the moment that you think should go next election?
Well, what I'd say to you is look at our top 10 and look at how fresh and rejuvenated and talented and sort of forward-looking that lineup is. And I can tell you, we've got people in that. If I just take agriculture, for example, if you look at someone like Barbara Kuriger, who's done an outstanding job building relationships in the agriculture sector, and then supported working with Nicola Grigg, a new MP coming in who has deep connections to the rural communities. That's the kind of logic that we've used in terms of making sure we've got teams within teams and we've got people working together on these portfolios.
So social investment portfolio, you've given it high priority. It was championed by Bill English previously, and you've given it to your deputy. Explain it in a single sentence, please.
It means that we acknowledge that there are people in New Zealand who have really challenged and messy and complicated lives. We want to be able to make targeted investments with them and their families in order to lift them up to participate in the Kiwi dream. Otherwise, we know the trajectory of where those lives are going, and we want everyone in New Zealand to realise their potential. So
you're talking about ultra-targeting. You support ultra-targeting.
Well, I just support targeting. I don't know what ultra-targeting means, but I mean targeting to people on the basis of need and actually making sure we help them to rise up and participate and realise their potential.
You're not concerned that you might miss people on either side if you are identifying a particularly specific group of people with need under social investment that others will miss out?
I can tell you we want all New Zealanders to realise their potential. That's what the National Party is here to do. We believe in people backing themselves, giving it a go, being the best that they can be, realising their potential. In this case, what we're talking about is people who are in extreme places of need and have been and need a hand, and that's what all of us as New Zealanders appreciate through a welfare system. But this is actually saying, hey, listen, we want to make sure that people don't become dependent upon a state. We want them to become independent, and in many cases, to be honest, people in this country, they don't all start together on the starting line. All 5-year-olds have a different, are not starting together at the same point in time. By virtue of where they were born, the neighbourhoods, the families, the situations they've come from, that they don't have the same opportunities. And so this is an acknowledgement that we fundamentally want to find a way to action this policy.
What do you mean by messy lives?
Well, what I mean is life is messy, right, and complicated, for all of us at times. But these are people who are doing it really tough, and we want to be able to lift them up and support them, and they can fully participate in the Kiwi dream.
Do you believe in having a target in terms of cutting the number of people on benefits?
No. I mean, what I'm really focused on at the moment is making sure that the maximum number of people can participate in.
So you won't have a target for slashing the number of people on benefits?
What we're talking about at this point is fundamentally making sure we can help all New Zealanders realise their potential.
Benefit sanctions, do you believe in them as a tool?
No.
Okay, so would you get rid of them if you were the Prime Minister? All benefit sanctions?
Sorry, no, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not going to go into that today. What I'm saying.
But you don't support
clearly,
them, you've just said. Yeah?
No, sorry. Let me clarify. I didn't understand your question. There will be cases for sanctions for benefits. That has been our policy in the past. But as to the specific detail, I can't comment on that today, Lisa. I just don't. I've still got to understand more.
Okay. Another benefit, superannuation. Will you make any changes to eligibility or targeting? Bill English's policy was to move it to 67. Can you say either way? Can you ring fence and say you won't touch it?
No, we continue to support that policy.
Continue to support which policy?
The program that's in place about increasing age to 67 over the coming years.
Okay, really appreciate your time, Stephen. Actually, before you go, Prime Minister has announced this afternoon that the country will be 90% double vaxxed by about the 14th or 15th of December. Where would you put us at on the traffic light system with that? Oh, we've just lost him. Never mind. That was Christopher Luxon, who is the new National Party leader. In breaking news, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has announced the state border will open early to the rest of Australia from 1 a.m. on Monday, December 13th. The original date was December 17th. Only unvaccinated arrivals will need to isolate. It is almost 17 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere ake nei. Is it okay to visit Nan and Pop at the rest home now that we are in the traffic light system? Fanfare and excitement accompanied Auckland's move out of lockdown, but some businesses in its less visible suburbs say not much has changed. While many flung the doors open, some have kept them shut, with operations in Otara and Otahuhu saying some of their customers are struggling with vaccine passport requirements. Other businesses spoken to appeared unaware of new rules, while some say they're too stretched to monitor them. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe report.
In case you missed it, Auckland's in the red and out of lockdown, but away from the glitz, glam, hustle and bustle of the super city's central suburbs, you wouldn't know it. Well, it's the first Monday of the traffic light system here in Otara Town Centre, and as for the vaccine pass, well, some have opted to stay with takeaway only, saying it's too hard to designate a staff member to checking, while others have given us sort of confused looks when we've asked about that vaccine pass.
Some of them don't have the pass, so we choose to continue doing that.
Jackie Shue manages the local Subway in Otara Mall. There's space for seating inside here, but a table plastered with menus blocks customers from entering.
We just try to provide our service to everybody, no different to everybody, so this is more easier for us. So once, if we remove the table, we let them to walk in, the responsible will be to all my staff. They have to ask, hello there, do you have the pass? If the people says no, what should we do?
It's a sentiment shared by many in Otara. The vast majority of hospitality businesses here are still doing things the old way, even those with capacity for seating. We run into Business Association Town Centre Manager Rana Judge, who tells us trade hasn't picked up here because the rules are confusing and not enough people have the pass.
They're not familiarised with this traffic light system and also with the vaccination pass. So definitely for next couple months people will be struggling.
Across the road, Easy Roast is sticking to takeaway only. No sitting in to chow down on that chicken dinner. Christine is already stretched, prepping meals, working the till, so forget vaccine passes, she says.
Quite hard, yeah, for the small business it's quite hard, yeah, because there's not enough people staff to do it, And so we prefer takeaways. Easy for us. If we sit inside, it's too hard.
In Otahuhu, Samantha Haliso waits and waits for diners to show up at Rocky's food joint. The doors are open, the tables are out, but it's deathly quiet, and Samantha says the vaccine pass simply isn't accessible for everyone in her community.
There's some that don't have a mobile phone, or they don't have access to a printer. So there is some cases where it's difficult that we won't be able to let them in because they don't have those necessities.
Instead, the business has been accepting vaccination cards given to people when they have their shots.
Not readily accessible for most of us, yeah. Especially the ones that have no internet and no access to Wi-Fi or any mobile phones. Like some of our elderly don't know how to use a mobile phone. So I'm not too sure if we're allowed to ask for the little cards for the double jabbed. But we are asking because that's the only thing that we can, because we don't want to turn people away too if they're already double vaxxed. We want them to come and shop normally.
Most locals we talk to have downloaded their vaccine pass, but say it's wrong to suggest access is easy for all Aucklanders.
For my mum, it was hard because she doesn't really use technology. But when she did, she got sent a blank one. But then the chemist helped her print her one, yeah.
I have a shop here. Lots of people, they come to me every day for that. I'll do that for them.
This man owns a phone repair shop, but forget cracked screens, he's received a flood of requests for vaccine pass help.
The reason is because for that you need an email. Because older people, they don't have emails. That's the problem. For email, because for them, if you have to register first, they send a code to the email, but they don't have email. That's the problem.
Then there's those who still aren't on board.
Nah, not yet.
Will you get one, do you think?
First, I'm trying to decide.
Yeah, it's a personal decision. To be honest, I don't really want to get the vaccine. Yeah.
So while Auckland's pulled up to the red light, it appears some are being left behind.
Some pharmacies are under fire for charging people a fee to provide a hard copy of their vaccine passports. The Pharmaceutical Society says printing should be free, but at least one Northern pharmacy says if people don't want to pay $10 for 3 copies, they can go elsewhere. It comes as some pharmacies prepare to also roll out rapid antigen testing next week, adding to an already burgeoning workload. Nita Blake-Person explains.
It's a busy morning at Whangarei's Kensington pharmacy. Prescriptions are being filled, customers have plenty of questions. The demand for vaccine passports is massive, and then there's the retail side of things.
Well, it's been crazy with passport. It's a little bit quieter today, but we've had 100 to 200 people a day last week, so it's been pretty crazy. And then we've also been doing vaccinating on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays.
People who don't have access to a smartphone can go to a pharmacy and give their details to get a printed vaccine passport. Suzanne Gent is the operations manager here and says they're adjusting as things are especially full on at the moment.
It's been a big demand and it's been very busy for our staff, and with losing some staff to the mandate, it's put a lot of pressure on our staff here.
5 people from the team of 50 stopped working at the pharmacy when the vaccine mandates came in. Now, as they adjust to the new workload, they've also got to prepare for rapid antigen testing. But their services are highly appreciated.
Easy peasy. And it took us like 5 minutes to get this.
Today, Whangarei woman Elizabeth Edwards among those grabbing her vaccine passport.
Save going to the doctors. I'll stand in line forever. But yeah, I'm cool with the pharmacies, they're cool.
Ken Laurie had come all the way from Dargaville to get his.
The pharmacy there's only one chemist there and they don't do it. We come over to Whangarei a lot and it was just a breeze. They were so great.
Most pharmacies are not charging for the paper printouts of the vaccine passport, but Whangarei's Tikipunga pharmacy is. It's costing $10 for 3 colour printouts and $4 extra for lamination. They say people are welcome to go elsewhere if they're not comfortable with the fee. But Pharmaceutical Society President Rhiannon Braun says that's disappointing.
Pharmacy is being paid to provide those to patients for free. If the pharmacy chooses not to do that, then that's one thing, but then to add on an additional cost to the patient makes me feel very uncomfortable.
She says it's been an incredibly busy time for pharmacies and not everyone will be rolling out rapid antigen testing when it becomes available next week.
I don't think it'll be one of those services that every pharmacy can offer. I think there's certain pharmacies that will be able to implement this faster, that have maybe better workspaces around to do lots of the other more clinical things.
Brond expects pharmacies that are already delivering vaccines and COVID passes will be the ones who are best set up for the testing, which make up around 40% of the country's 1,000 pharmacies. But she says pharmacies are happy to play their part in the COVID response, a vital role in serving their communities.
Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei on the vaccine passes, getting them printed at the pharmacy. Have you had to pay a fee, and what do you think of that? Also, interested in your thoughts on the new National Party lineup. Pātui mai, text me 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Heavy rain has swamped the Greater Wellington region today, causing flooding, slips and road closures. Met Services orange warning remains in force from Marlborough through to Taranaki. Now we're crossing now to our reporter Somya Bamiripati, who's at the Riverbank car park in Lower Hutt. Kia ora, Somya, what's it like out there?
Kia ora, Lisa. So it's pretty wet out here. There is some surface flooding. It's actually quite an improvement on earlier today. Just an hour ago, where I'm standing was completely submerged. We saw about 5 to 10 cars underwater, and Lower Hutt's not the only place in Wellington that has seen heavy rainfalls. So Met Services Kelburn weather station saw 85.8 millilitres since 2 a.m. this morning. Now that's up on the average in December. Normally it would be around 83.2 millilitres. Wainui, also in the Hutt, saw the most rainfall with 72 millilitres between 3 and 9 a.m. this morning. And Porirua saw 60.8 millilitres, and Kelburn, Parapara both saw just over 50 millilitres. So a wet day here.
Absolutely, and for people who are listening and not watching, some of those cars, they look to be a couple of hatchbacks, which we've basically only got a couple of inches of the roof poking out over the top. So, I mean, what has been the impact in the neighbourhood?
Well, with Wellington Wet Water has seen quite a bit of surface flooding around the area. Their pump stations are running at capacity. They've also had reports of a small number of residents reporting household flooding, so they're looking into that at the moment. And of course, yes, the cars here. We spoke to one person who said they saw contractors trying to extract an electric vehicle, which let off a loud bang. And there is also a landslip which has suspended trains between Kandala and Johnsonville.
And what is it looking like for the rest of the night?
So the heavy rain warning will stay in place for Wellington until 9 p.m. For Kapiti, Horowhenua and the Tararua ranges, that is in place until midnight.
So have you got a bit of respite there? I can't tell if there's still fine rain falling, is it, or is it stopped for the moment?
There is fine rain. It's nothing like what we saw even just an hour ago. And as I said, it's been amazing how fast the water has receded from the car park, because even an hour ago the water levels were about 5 metres further forward, and there's a car about 5 metres away which was submerged only recently.
Well, stay dry and safe. That is Somya Bamiripati, who's at the Riverbank car park in Lower Hutt. And there's some pretty dramatic pictures of the cars almost entirely submerged. It is 28 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The battle continues between Team New Zealand and the group campaigning for the 37th America's Cup to be defended in Auckland. The Kiwi Home Defence Group had enough support to force the squadron to a special general meeting on Thursday to vote on a motion that the Cup be defended on home waters. But the group's withdrawn their request after reports suggested that Team New Zealand boss Grant Dalton was doing a bit of a ring around to change people's minds. Well, sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me now to explain this latest development. Clay, this really is a story that keeps on giving, isn't it? So where have we got to right now?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, it certainly is. I'm going to do my best to explain this in the simplest terms possible, but of course this is the cloak and dagger of the America's Cup and its inner workings, so there is a bit of detail to work through here. Basically, there is that group that's been pushing for some months now to keep the defence of the next America's Cup here in Auckland. But basically, since they went public, the group has been at odds with Grant Dalton, the boss of Team New Zealand, who continues to maintain it's not financially viable as it stands to hold the defence here in Auckland, and that's why they're looking at these overseas options. Now, what Dalton's stance has forced this group to do is basically change tack in a way and focus their attention on the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. Now, the Yacht Squadron, who are essentially basically the club that Team New Zealand represents in the America's Cup. And how this has played out is a QC, a man named Jim Farmer, who's a former director of Team New Zealand, has basically gone to the members of the Yacht Squadron, and he's gained enough support to force a vote to bring in a new rule which says the Cup must be defended here in Auckland. That vote was due to take place on Thursday at a special general meeting, but since that meeting was scheduled, as you said, a report emerged that Grant Dalton had been ringing around the members, and basically what he'd been telling them is warning them in a way that if this motion passed, that Team New Zealand could essentially collapse into liquidation within the space of 6 months, and that would leave the Yacht Squadron without a team to defend the Cup. So in response to this today, the group has withdrawn their request for this special general meeting and this vote, and Jim Farmer says they've done this because Grant Dalton's actions, which they're calling threats, have basically undermined what was due to take place here at this meeting on Thursday. Now, Farmer's position has been fully supported by Mark Dunphy. That name will sound familiar to people. He's behind the Kiwi Home Defence campaign, and he's even gone a step further, basically saying that Grant Dalton's in step with Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron leadership in their attempts to squash these attempts to keep a home defence alive. So despite all this group says they're going to push on with their efforts to try and keep the defence here in Auckland. All we do know at this point is that Team New Zealand have set a deadline of March 31 next year to make a decision about the host venue. So who knows what will happen. I'm sure between now and then still a lot to transpire with this issue, Lisa.
Oh, there'll be plenty more chapters, Clay. I'll bet you'll be back here talking about it before that March deadline. Now, it is the fourth day of the second cricket test between New Zealand and India, and are the Black Caps still hanging on there? A lot of late nights as well, Clay, leading up to this.
Yeah, I think the late nights may have come to an end. New Zealand started the day 140 for 5 in pursuit of hanging on for a draw, basically. That target of 540 pretty much out of their reach, and even hanging on for these 2 days, really a tough ask. They started the day 5 down, and up till about 5 minutes ago, Lisa, things were going pretty well, but just in the space of the last couple of overs, they've lost 3 wickets, now 8 down, and just 2 wickets away from defeat. So looks pretty inevitable, and of course a bit of a shame after Ajaz Patel's sort of heroic efforts over the weekend, becoming just the third player to take 10 wickets in a test innings, taking 14 wickets in total, setting all kinds of records, but New Zealand look likely to be heading for a defeat here. They're going to lose the series 1-0 and head home on a losing note. Unfortunately, what has been a great occasion for one player is not going to be probably a great occasion for the team ultimately.
And he seems so chilled about it, Clay. Ajaz.
Very laid-back customer, is known for that, and you could just see it on the field. I guess, he celebrated the moment, but for someone who achieved something that's just happened 3 times in the space of, I think, 2,500 test matches over this 150 years or however long test cricket's been going on, very understated about his big achievement.
Good to talk to you, Clay. That's Clay Wilson, RNZ sports reporter there. E te iwi e haere nei a checkpoint. 3 teenagers dead in just 6 months in Christchurch. A 16-year-old is charged with murder after the death of an 18-year-old in a Countdown car park. We have some advice for parents worried about the safety of their children. Australian kids are set to be vaccinated before they return to school. And 3 years of donuts bags a drive-through worker a brand new house after striking up a friendship with a loyal customer. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or send us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Ane a marama mina pita pita kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. The Prime Minister is urging people to get their second COVID-19 vaccinations this week, with projections showing the country could reach a nationwide average of 90% fully vaccinated by the middle of next week. Jacinda Ardern also says all three of Auckland's district health boards are on track to meet a 90% vaccination rate by the time its border starts to open on December the 15th. She says the high vaccination rate will ensure the country has a safe summer break. Jacinda Ardern also says the purchase of antiviral drugs is a big step forward in fighting COVID-19. The government has purchased 60,000 courses of Pfizer's oral antiviral medication to treat early infections and is expected to be delivered in April once it's approved by MedSafe. It announced in October the purchase of another antiviral, Molnupiravir, pending approval. She says international evidence shows the drugs reduce the number of people needing hospital treatment. The new National Party leader, Christopher Luxon, has declined to be drawn on whether a demotion for former leader Judith Collins in his first caucus reshuffle will create issues for his new team. Mr Luxon announced a new lineup, promoting several people to the front bench and demoting Ms Collins to 19th and assigning her a relatively minor portfolio. But Mr Luxon told Checkpoint, as far as he was aware, Ms Collins wants to stay in Parliament. He says her demotion was not to encourage her out the door, and she would bring great passion to her science and technology portfolio. Heavy rain in Wellington has caused landslides, surface flooding and disrupted public transport, with train service on at least one line affected. Parts of Wellington have had more rain today than they usually get for all of December. The Met Service's Tui McInnes says by mid-afternoon, the weather station in Kelburn recorded 85.8 millimetres of rainfall since 2 a.m. It normally receives 83.2 millimetres throughout December. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Thanks, Marama. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnau. Ko taku hoa inaine. Ko Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, the National Party's taken aim at the Reserve Bank Governor. What's going on there?
Yeah, on the Working Group podcast last week, ACT Party leader David Seymour and National Party, now Finance spokesperson Simon Bridges, says that they would like to see Adrian Orr go. Simon Bridges, he did confirm his views in a piece that appeared on the Politic News website this morning. And in the podcast, Mr Bridges said he did not want Adrian Orr reappointed when his 5-year term expires in March in 2023. This was because he felt like he didn't appeal to the centre-right, and he questioned some of Orr's policy implementation. So he highlighted some key issues for Simon Bridges was that the Reserve Bank's response to the pandemic, he said in his view, had really inflamed house prices. There's rising inflation, and he felt that the RBNZ was focused on things that may not be as important, such as Māori issues and climate change. Now, the position of the Reserve Bank, we should state, the Reserve Bank Governor is independent of the government, and monetary policy decisions are made by the Monetary Policy Committee. And following this story that came out today, we tried to contact members of the business and finance community, such as Business New Zealand and the Bankers Association, to get some comment from them about what they think about Adrian Orr. You know, do they support him in his current position? But they didn't respond. However, the Council of Trade Unions Director of Policy and former economic advisor to the Finance Minister Grant Robertson, Craig Rennie, he was very complimentary of Adrian Orr's performance as the governor of the Reserve Bank. He said that the bank had done a really good job and was responsible for things like financial stability, which is really strong at the moment, and he felt that the bank had performed very well in response to the challenges that were brought on by the pandemic. And he said it was difficult to blame the RBNZ for the acceleration in house prices when the country had not been building enough houses for the past 30 years. He also said that this criticism about the RBNZ's willingness to work with Māori and Pacifica communities and give attention to climate change, he says that these are really broad-based implications that the Reserve Bank should be thinking about, and by international standards, what the RBNZ is actually doing is not really all that unusual. He also went on to say that the Reserve Bank Governor is one of the most important politically independent roles in the country. He said it did not help financial markets or financial stability to have individuals suggesting that governors should stay or go. And, this message that was made, these points that were made by Craig Rennie were also echoed in many respects by the head of the KiwiSaver provider, Sam Stubbs. One line I just wanted to quote him on was this one. He said, if you had said before COVID that the worst outcome for the economy will be that it will be trucking along, we'll have very strong employment and house prices would have gone up 25 to 40%, any Reserve Bank governor in history would have taken that. He also rounded out his comments by saying that it wasn't unusual for a senior politician to criticise a senior public servant. So look, we will wait to see more on this and see what else we might hear from Simon Bridges on this.
And the Shipping Federation says it would be a bit of a challenge to reintroduce a national shipping line to help out local operators.
Yeah, this follows a new report into the shipping sector which found that there was an uneven playing field for domestic and international providers. There were major problems that the report found that need to be fixed to ensure that we have resilience in our supply chains and we hit our environmental targets. And the report that was commissioned by the Transport Agency found our local players were being shortchanged on a number of fronts. One clear example is that domestic shipping firms pay levies associated with the emissions trading scheme, but these aren't imposed on international players. So look, a clear disadvantage there. It also called for the transition to less harmful fuels to help lower emissions. We spoke to the Shipping Federation about this report, and one of the things that came up in our discussions was the talks about introducing a national line, a national shipping line, and whether or not that would alleviate some of the challenges we're seeing here. They said, well, no, not really, because look, you could create a new shipping line, you could probably find the ships. The problem you're going to have is that you're not going to be able to find the labour to actually helm them. Look, that was their view on this latest report. More work is being done on this. This report is the first of 3 to be released to determine how a $30 million fund will be spent to best support coastal shipping in the country.
And shall we take a quick whip around the markets, Nicholas?
Yeah, the NZX top 50 was down 79 points today, nearly 2/3% to 12,598. The dollar is trading at 67.6 US cents and 96.2 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite, that's Nicholas Poynton with Business News. Some rest homes in whānau are scratching their heads over the new traffic light system and what it means for visiting elderly residents in aged care. Some residents haven't had family visits face-to-face for close to 4 months due to COVID restrictions. But now the country has moved into the traffic light system. Homes are ready to open the doors back up. But the question is to who and under what guidelines? Well, joining me now is Simon Wallace from the New Zealand Aged Care Association. Kia ora, Simon.
Kia ora, Lisa.
So what's the issue here?
Lisa, in the space of 12 hours on Thursday night and Friday morning, we had 3 different versions of a so-called community response framework for aged care issued by the Ministry of Health. And that just simply doesn't align with the traffic light system. We should not be applying less restraints in aged care than we are in the community as a whole. And under the system, we have some DHBs that are operating at green when the whole of the country is at orange and red.
So what does that mean in practical terms then when it comes to going to a visit in an aged care centre? If they're operating at green, what checks and balances are there for visitors coming in?
Well, I think the point that we're making is that at green, there are a lot less restrictions, and we certainly want to be able to facilitate visits, and we can do that at all levels, but we don't want to be applying less restraints in what is a very vulnerable setting than the community as a whole is operating under. And so, for example, in Taranaki, where we have active COVID cases in the community and low vaccination rates, we have that DHB applying what is a green framework or a mild framework to aged residential care, which we just don't think is appropriate given the risk profile of that DHB.
So you would like some advice that marries up with orange, red, green, specifically what you can do with every traffic light colour?
Yeah, we'd like the system for aged care to align with the traffic light system, and the whole country is at orange and red. And actually at orange and red, we can still facilitate family visits into our rest homes. It's just that there are slightly more restrictions. So we just want this confusion ironed out because it's also confusion for our families as well as our operators. And look, we owe it to our families to get it sorted out.
Should every facility be using the same rules in your view, or should each one be able to pick and choose what they decide to do?
No, the association works with the ministry and the DHBs to apply general level guidance to all aged care facilities, and that's the guidance that goes out to them. There will be cases, for example, where COVID is in a rest home or there's an outbreak in a rest home where it simply won't be possible for family visits to happen, and I'm sure that people will be understanding of that. But on the whole, at Orange and Red, we can facilitate visits.
Okay, so at Red, Simon, who can go in and visit Nana in the rest home? Do you have to be vaccinated, or can you visit unvaccinated at Red?
No. We require at Red and at Orange, at all the levels actually, we require double vaccination of all visitors and a vaccine pass.
What if you are not eligible? Let's say you've got a grandchild that wants to go and visit Pop, and they are 8 years old, so at the moment cannot be vaccinated. Are they allowed in at those Red and Orange levels?
Yeah, I was just going to get to that, Lisa. And for children under 12, until they're vaccinated, we've actually said to all our rest homes, facilitate those visits, make those visits happen outside if you can, and we think that's reasonable as we go into summer, because children can't be vaccinated. And look, in most cases that is happening, and those visits are being facilitated.
So is there an issue here or discussion to be had about age and stage, right? And in terms of how important is the company versus the risk to a person at a certain point in their life?
Well, look, I think we've seen from all around the world how risky COVID is for our older people, and we've seen it in New Zealand. We've done a great job in New Zealand of managing that risk. It's because we've had really good infection prevention control in place. So our processes apply to the risk level to our residents, and it's a very difficult balance for us. We've got to balance the health and protection of our residents with the ability of family to see their loved ones. And for the most part, we're actually doing that really successfully.
So rapid antigen tests, what kind of role are they going to play at rest homes?
Oh, look, rapid antigen tests are really, really important. And that's another problem that we have under the system, because rapid antigen tests are only available at Orange and Red. So we can't be making those available to rest homes at Green. And they are a very good tool to facilitate visits very efficiently and very quickly, and it prevents the need for waiting for 3 days for a PCR test. So RATs are really important, just as boosters are really important. And we've got a lot of residents coming up now for 6 months, and we know that the immunity drops after 6 months, so we really need to get those boosters into our older residents as another part of that defence mechanism.
So the rapid antigen tests are being used to test who specifically, Simon?
Well, they're available as a surveillance testing for our staff and our residents, but we would like to be able to use them for visitors as well, because, as I say, it prevents the need for a person having to take a test 3 days before they plan a visit to a rest home. This is what's being done around the world, and we want to be able to do it here. But again, because of this misalignment, those rapid antigen tests are not going to be available, or are not available now in some DHB regions.
And so what's your expectation around ongoing conversations with health authorities and the government and coming to some kind of resolution?
We've been working through this since Friday. We've been working through it today. We just want to get it sorted and resolved so that the whole situation around visiting, particularly coming up to Christmas, is really, really clear for our families.
Thanks for joining us, Simon. That's Simon Wallace, who's from New Zealand Aged Care Association. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hey, Muriaki na pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, National moves the deck chairs, but can it save the ship? More on Chris Luxon's reshuffle. The Waitangi Tribunal has heard that Māori were on the back foot right from the start of the COVID pandemic. Today was the first day of a special hearing into whether the Crown has breached te tiriti in its COVID response. Jamie Tahana is following the hearing.
The COVID outbreak has evolved into a Māori outbreak. 3,000 of the country's active cases are Māori, the most number of daily cases, and by far the most deaths. The Māori vaccination rate, while climbing, is still well behind the general population. Only 72% are fully vaxxed. The application for the hearing was brought by the Māori Council. Its chair, Peter Fraser, says an inequitable age-based vaccine rollout, then a rush to the traffic light system, has left Māori worst affected by the coronavirus.
What this meant was that Māori were effectively late to start with the bulk of our population. What our concern was then, that the government would go to the new framework early. So the starting point were Māori were slow to get started, and the risk was Māori were then left behind.
The government has long insisted it hasn't failed Māori in the COVID response, and that Māori leaders, iwi and other organisations have been regularly consulted. But one of those iwi leaders, Mike Smith, described the level of engagement as insulting. Patsy consultation, he called it, with decisions already made.
The engagement was characterised by microaggressions, sort of sense of a Wellington exceptionalism, somewhat cynical view that what have iwi got to offer to this process, we're the government, what do you think you're going to do about it? That was the overall feel of it.
Mr Smith says it wasn't until the government lost control of the Delta outbreak that their opinions were sought. In Hamilton, the managing director of Te Kōhao Health, Lady Tureiti Moxon, says they've had to run one of Waikato's largest responses on the smell of an oily rag. She told the tribunal resourcing has been a huge issue.
Every response that we've ever had in terms of resourcing and funding has been slow. And we have basically used our own resources to make things happen ourselves. And that's been the big issue all along.
And she says it's only going to get worse.
If you think the tsunami is here, it's coming. And it's coming big time. And I tell you, even though Māori providers, Pacifica providers have showed and demonstrated our ability to be able to do this mahi, we still need to be resourced to the point where we can do this without having to worry about whether you get one FTE here or two FTEs there.
The government has bolstered the amount of funding for Māori health providers, recently announcing $120 million for both the vaccine rollout and for the move to the traffic light system. But the head of the National Hauora Coalition, Simon Royal, says the funding has been piecemeal.
The simple fact of the matter, this is far too little money, far too late. This needed to be invested in right at the beginning of the pandemic.
The hearing is set down for the rest of the week, with the Crown delivering its response and evidence on Thursday.
Another drug has been added to the COVID toolkit. The government secured a pre-purchase agreement for 60,000 courses of Pfizer's antiviral medication. Known as Paxlovid overseas, the medication is administered as 3 pills and taken twice daily for 3 days. The Prime Minister says clinical trials have shown an 89% reduction of hospitalisation and death.
This drug, taken orally over the course of a few days, is the first of its kind to really hone in on coronavirus and can be taken at the first sign of symptoms to help stop people from getting really unwell. It's a big step forward for the management of COVID-19 globally.
The antiviral is expected to be delivered to New Zealand in April, subject to MedSafe approval, and it follows the purchase of the oral antiviral, Molnupiravir, in October, which is also awaiting MedSafe approval. Jacinda Ardern says Delta's transmissibility will mean more cases and more people recovering at home.
And so we must be as prepared as possible to support all of those individuals to get well soon. And so treatments are another way we can keep people safe and ensure that our hospitals maintain capacity.
Ardern says prevention via vaccines and the traffic light system remain the best protection against COVID-19. For nearly 2 years, the lives of so many kids have been disrupted by the pandemic, but in 5 weeks, children in Australia aged 5 to 11 will be able to get their first COVID vaccine dose before the start of the next school year. Australia's drug regulator has given it provisional approval, as the ABC's Annie Guest reports.
An ode to joy at the end of year piano concert. 8-year-old friends Adelaide Ackroyd and Timmy Bryce are playing a duet. soon it's holiday time. And this one might include an excursion to a vaccination clinic after the TGA gave the green light to Pfizer's COVID vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds.
I think that sounds pretty good.
Why is that? Why is that good?
Because if you get, vaccines, then it's hard to get COVID. I like it because normally every time we get a needle, we get a beanie boo.
Yeah, Adelaide, that's you because otherwise you cry because you hate needles.
Adelaide's 9-year-old sister Alice, mum Zoe and dad Brendan are all in favour of the jab.
Actually, I'm quite pleased to hear that there's provisional approval for the vaccine. Mainly because at the moment those under 12 age bracket is the most vulnerable age bracket, and a lot of the outbreaks that we're seeing at the moment are actually happening in schools. So for us, it is relief. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I trust the professional medical people, and so if they say it's safe, I believe it's safe.
The Pfizer vaccine has already been given to 4 million children in the United States, giving confidence to immunisation expert and paediatrician, Associate Professor Margie Danshan from the Murdoch Children's Research Institute.
It is just a relief, I think, to be able to protect this age group, even though we know that we haven't seen an increase in the severity of clinical infection in this age group with Delta. We have seen a lot more cases over the last few months and school closures.
And how big a difference will this make to stopping the spread of COVID in the community?
Child-to-child transmission can occur, and of course children can take it home to unvaccinated adults. So I think being able to protect this age group now is just very welcome news.
It's now up to the government's Vaccine Expert Advisory Group, ATAGI, to work out how the rollout will proceed. But January 10 has been pencilled in as the date it'll begin.
In the US state of Ohio, one Dunkin' Donuts employee has received the surprise of a lifetime from one loyal customer, a fully furnished home. The customer saw the need and stepped up just in time for Christmas. CNN's Kendria Lafleur has more.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Excitement.
Oh my God, we so happy.
And anticipation for Ebony Johnson and her children.
I can't wait to see it.
What awaits them? A home they can call their own that's fully furnished, something they haven't had in a while.
Thank you so much, Miss Susan, for helping me. I'm so happy.
The woman she's hugging made this all possible. Their friendship began 3 years ago at the drive-thru of Dunkin' Donuts. Johnson works there, and Suzanne Burke is a loyal customer.
I go every morning, and Ebony has worked the drive-thru for over 3 years. And really has just provided amazing customer service.
But when she noticed her favorite employee was gone for a few weeks, she began to worry, learning Ebony and her kids were evicted from their home after falling on hard times.
When she experienced this hardship, I just wanted to see if I could help her, just improve her life and the life for her kids and make sure that they had stable housing so that she could continue to provide the excellent service that she does at Dunkin'.
And this is the result of her help, finding organizations to help the family find a home and also partnering with a staging designer.
Perfect time of year to feel like, you're spreading joy.
And New Life Furniture Bank.
As much a gift to us as it is to them to be able to provide this for them.
And the kids are just as excited as their moms.
Yes. So nice. So nice. Hey, this is our beautiful living room.
Now with a fully furnished home, she says she and her kids can have a Merry Christmas and enjoy the rest of the holidays.
I'm just so thankful that we back in our own. The Lord really looked out for me because I kept praying and saying, could I be at home before Christmas?
Let's get to some of your feedback now, and a lot of you getting in touch about the rest home situation and being able to visit relatives and parents. Monique says, was told that my mum was dying of a broken heart because she's so lonely. She is so much weaker physically and cognitively after 4 months of isolation, and still I can only visit for 15 minutes once a week now that we are at red. At this point, COVID would kill her, but she won't catch the virus. Please keep exploring this issue as there are so many suffering with no voice. Another person says the risk of COVID in rest homes is real, but the deterioration of those in my partner's dementia care home is devastating. All staff wear masks and all visitors, and no longer all the college kids coming in to entertain, play games, walk and chat. Utterly devastating. People unvaxxed should bugger off. It's not about them. They disadvantage everyone. These residents really are severely disadvantaged. Not seeing full faces gives double dementia. Ghastly, tense environment replaces the happy community atmosphere of July and before. Another listener says, haven't got a passport, was invited to wave to my mum through the window. How disturbing for her. No thank you. Where's the kindness in that stupid invitation? And on passes and getting printouts from the pharmacy, no pharmacy doing COVID passes on Waitangi, John tells us. Another person says, St Luke's Mall Pharmacy will give you a free COVID pass, black and white print. Warehouse stationery at St Luke's will laminate it for you for $2. And another listener reckons that the pharmacies that did the vaccinations got very well paid per shot. Printing out a certificate is not a big ask. And this from a listener. I'm an oldie who had my pharmacist print my vaccine pass for me at the Miramar Pharmacy. They were so busy, the line was long, but it was actually very quick, only a few minutes. They didn't charge. I really feel for the unsung heroes of the healthcare system.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The National Party leader says a demotion for Judith Collins is not a signal for her to consider stepping away at the next election. Christopher Luxon this afternoon announced his first caucus lineup, promoting several younger MPs to the front bench and demoting Ms Collins to number 19 and assigning her just one portfolio, science and technology. Mr Luxon, who succeeded Ms Collins last week, denied on Checkpoint that he was trying to force her out of Parliament.
No, as I said to you, we've got 33 people with a different set of skills. We have to assemble a very complementary team. And we're going to use the talents of all the people that are in the team. And Judith's got some incredible talents, some great experience, and she's most importantly passionate about those subjects.
Christopher Luxon says any decision on Judith Collins' political future is purely up to her. The Prime Minister says the country is on track to meet the 90% double vaccination rate by Tuesday or Wednesday next week. As it stands, 88% of the eligible population is fully vaccinated and 93% have had their first dose. Jacinda Ardern says every vaccination helps.
So if you're due for your second dose, please get it this week. If you haven't yet had your first, please talk to someone who has. Reach out. Make sure you're having your questions answered. It's the number one thing you can do to help make sure we have a safe Christmas and summer for you and your loved ones.
And the Prime Minister says the new oral antiviral drug secured by the government is a big step forward in the global management of COVID-19. The government has an agreement for 60,000 courses of Pfizer's antiviral Paxlovid expected to be delivered in April. Jacinda Ardern says the clinical trials are promising with an 89% reduction in hospitalisation and death. A Whangarei pharmacy is under fire for charging people a fee to provide a hard copy of their vaccine passports. The Tikipunga pharmacy is defending charging $10 for 3 colour printouts of the pass and an extra $4 for lamination. But the president of the Pharmaceutical Society, Rhiannon Braund, says that's not how it should work.
Pharmacy is being paid to provide those to patients for free. If the pharmacy chooses not to do that, then that's one thing, but then to add on an additional cost to the patient makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Meanwhile, pharmacies are gearing up to roll out rapid antigen tests from next Wednesday. Parts of Wellington have had more rain today than they usually get for the whole month of December, with the heavy rain set to continue for several more hours. Flooding has affected roads and some houses, and a large car park in Lower Hutt is underwater after the Hutt River burst its banks. A landslip has also suspended train services between Kandala and Johnsonville. Heavy rain and wind today temporarily halted rescue efforts after Indonesia's Semeru volcano erupted and killed 14 people on Saturday. The mountain on the island of Java erupted dramatically, shooting a towering column of ash into the sky that blanketed surrounding villages. More than 50 people have suffered injuries, mostly burns. On the ground, military officers, police and residents have been digging through mud with their hands to extricate victims. Kitchens and health facilities have been set up for more than 1,000 people who have lost their homes. Australia's Prime Minister has effectively invited the former Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, to contest the next federal election for the Liberal Party. Ms Berejiklian recently resigned after being named in an investigation by the state's Independent Commission Against Corruption. Scott Morrison says Ms Berejiklian is the victim of a pile-on.
So I think this is a great opportunity. If Gladys wishes to run, but again, that's up to her.
The Liberal Party has extended its deadline for candidates to nominate for Warringah, giving Gladys Berejiklian time to consider her options. And New Zealand have fallen to a 372-run defeat to India in the second cricket test in Mumbai. The Black Caps have lasted less than an hour on day 4 to be all out for 167 in their second innings. The result means India win the two-match series 1-0. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tēnā Moitara, celebrating Māori arts and culture. Ricky Swinell looks back on another weekend of sport, and historian Matthew Wright. Last year he published a biography of Kiwi warrior Bernard Freyberg. Now he's written a book about the battle cruiser New Zealand, this country's gift to the British Empire, launched in 1911, just in time for the First World War, on nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, also Gisborne. Partly cloudy with isolated showers. Bay of Plenty, cloudy, occasional drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning, then a few showers from the afternoon. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country, Hawke's Bay and Waitangi. Rain with heavy falls, gradually easing tomorrow. Possible thunderstorms over central areas in the afternoons and evenings. For Marlborough and Nelson, occasional rain with some heavy falls for today. Rain clearing for tomorrow evening. Bulla, Western and Fiordland, mostly fine in Fiordland, but partly cloudy with a few showers elsewhere. Canterbury and Otago, cloudy with occasional drizzle. Clearing inland Otago tomorrow morning and elsewhere tomorrow evening. For Southland, partly cloudy with some fine weather expected tomorrow. And for Rekoho, the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. It's coming up to 6 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. National's new leader, Christopher Luxon, has shaken up the caucus, unveiling a new front bench with new faces and a new focus. He's demoted his predecessor, Judith Collins, stripping her of any critical portfolios and dropping her down the rankings. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
This is the new National. Christopher Luxon promised a reset, reshuffle, a new look lineup.
I think the New Zealand public are going to say that's a different team, that's a different lineup, that looks fresh, new and different and highly capable.
But in with the new means out with the old. Judith Collins tumbling from the top job to number 19 and landing only one minor portfolio. Research and innovation, a major snub.
She's got a lot to offer us as our team, and I can tell you, Judith is very satisfied with that, and I am too.
She couldn't confirm that today, turning down RNZ's interview request, saying she was moving house. With Simon Bridges in the Plum finance gig, that leaves just one former leader to deal with, Todd Muller, in from the cold. He had planned to retire at the election, but will now stay on unranked, taking on the fisheries portfolio.
He's excited to be back, and we're pleased to have him back.
The list is all Luxon. He made the calls, he allocated the roles, consulting only with his deputy Nicola Willis and Mr Bridges. Chris Bishop comes in at number 4, retaining his COVID-19 portfolio, and Shane Reti keeps health at number 5.
I'm actually quite excited, very excited.
The biggest promotions go to those Mr Luxon deems the high performers. Erica Stanford shoots up a whopping 18 spots, adding education to her responsibilities after her advocacy for split migrant families.
They are our teachers, they are our nurses, they are our doctors, our IT workers. We need them here.
Matt Ducey jumps 12 spots given his work in the mental health sphere.
How good would it be in 2023 if we turn up and our policies around suicide prevention are harmonised?
And Simeon Brown is up 10, taking over the transport portfolio, moving away from his focus on gangs.
They've delivered more gang members than police officers here in New Zealand.
Just the top 20 members are numbered to the shadow cabinet. The remaining 13 are unranked, a deliberate decision.
We're doing things different because I'm not from politics world. I'm coming from a world where we build things on performance, not on hierarchy.
National knows it needs plans to do things differently after the past 4 years of dysfunction, but just different won't be enough. They'll have to be better too. Tomorrow, Mr Luxon will face off with the Prime Minister in Parliament for the first time.
And a number of you getting in touch about that reshuffle, particularly about Judith Collins's portfolio, research, science, innovation and technology. And this is what you've had to say. So Luxon has demoted Crusher to 19th on the list and given her the RST portfolio. Shows us how important they think RST is. And another person has said, so disappointed to see that the science and innovation portfolio is consigned to such a low ranking. Seems like Mr Luxon has no concept of the importance of science and research in leading us to the solutions for major problems we are facing. Climate change, the need for innovative ideas, present and future pandemics, new ideas for farming, agriculture, new medicines for chronic diseases and many more. Save us from Mr Luxon and his stale old school economics. Tried and failed already, that listener says. And Bob's got in touch. Short and sharp as Bob on his feedback. He says it's a bit like moving around the stale buns in a grotty bakery. Thanks for getting in touch, Bob. And this person says, National Party reshuffle, we are assured based on talent and ability. And their finance spokesperson thinks the Reserve Bank governor caused the housing crisis. Basic school economics covers supply and demand. Somehow the immensely talented national finance team missed that lesson. Thank you for your feedback. Do keep it coming. A 16-year-old has been charged with the murder of another teenager in Christchurch, the third death of a teen in the city this year. It follows the shooting of 16-year-old Connor Whitehead last month and the fatal stabbing of another 16-year-old, Zion Purukamu, at a party in Fendleton in August. Conan Young sought some expert advice for the parents of teens, anxious to know how they can keep their children and their friends safe on the weekend.
Flowers are starting to be left at the scene of this latest attack, the third time residents of Christchurch have mourned for a killed teen in recent months. But Sue Bagshaw, who's a senior doctor at Christchurch's 298 Youth Health, says it's important parents remember these sorts of incidents are still rare.
But having said that, we really, need to tone down. The whole of our society is over the top at the moment, and I'm sure part of that is COVID and lockdowns and restrictions and, most importantly, uncertainty. And therefore, I think what we can give our young people is as much certainty as we are able.
Dr Bagshaw says a lot of the harm she sees in her clinic involves alcohol. She'd like to see a societal shift in the way alcohol is viewed so that teenagers don't see binge drinking as a rite of passage. She says the example set by parents is an important place to start.
We keep saying, don't do as I do as I tell you. But actually, how we learn, we copy what people do. And so, yes, it's great responsibility on parents.
But Sue Bagshaw says teenagers are actually drinking less now than when their parents were their age.
This is according to the Youth 2000 study, which is a random sample of all high school students in New Zealand. In 2001, the amount of alcohol used between 2001 and 2019 has halved.
The charity Parenting Place offers courses and advice for those trying to raise a family. One of its childhood family psychologists, Catherine Tarr, says some sort of adult supervision at teenage parties is always a good idea. She says it's important to remember that taking risks is an important part of being a teenager.
And so perhaps instead of organising a party with alcohol, perhaps we can organise other things for them to do, like jumping off a wharf or doing rock climbing, or, things that still give you the sense of excitement, adrenaline rush, but that they are a bit more not so actual risky.
Catherine Tarr says parents worried about their children when they're out on the town should come up with a code word or an emoji for when they're in trouble.
So if you can set up with your teenager in advance the idea that I'm your parent who loves you, your safety is so important to me, I want you to be able to call me or text me this emoji whenever you need it, and I will come, pick you up and make sure you're safe.
The name of the teenager has yet to be released. As their case is currently before the courts, the police have declined to be interviewed for this story. However, in a written statement, Canterbury Metro Area Commander Superintendent Lane Todd says the tragic deaths this year of 3 young people under these circumstances is devastating for our community. He says their thoughts are with the families and friends affected by their loss. Overall, the number of homicides is down so far this year compared to last. In 2020, there were 182. This year, to the end of October, there were just 148.
The government may be making inroads in tackling child poverty, but yet another report shows Māori, Pacific and disabled tamariki are in danger of being left behind. The latest child poverty monitor calls for much more targeted support for those whānau, as structural barriers like racism and ableism continue to put them at a disadvantage. Here's our social issues reporter, Sarah Robson.
Before COVID-19 hit, about 1 in 10 children were living in families struggling to provide the basics. But for Pacific children, that figure was 1 in 4, and for Māori and disabled children, it was 1 in 5. The Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner, Gladys Berejiklian, says that's unacceptable.
It's just way out of whack. I mean, really, when we boil it down, we're meeting the national target really beautifully for Pākehā children, but we're leaving Māori, Pacific and disabled children behind.
Gladys Berejiklian says overall the government appears to be on track to hit its child poverty reduction targets.
It's clear we've got a strong foundation for progress and, government targets are working. But some kids are missing out and that is absolutely heartbreaking.
That means much more focused efforts are needed to lift all whānau out of poverty.
We've seen some increases in benefits and we saw a small increase in the family tax credit of $20. But look, it's way short of what people need to pay rent, to pay power, get decent food on the table, to make sure every child's got a pair of shoes.
But what the Child Poverty Monitor doesn't show is the impact of the pandemic on struggling whānau. That's because official statistics covering the aftermath of last year's first nationwide lockdown and subsequent Auckland lockdowns will only be released early next year. Jackie Southey from Save the Children says families in Tamaki Makaurau will have been hit hard.
We haven't really taken into account the cost of living in Auckland, particularly high rental prices, along with overcrowded housing. And then throwing into the mix of that families that might have to isolate or not be able to work because of needing to isolate. So it's quite a bit of a bleak picture for those families, and we're yet to see that real impact come through in any data.
Prime Minister and Minister for Child Poverty Reduction, Jacinda Ardern, says progress is being made.
One thing we do know that is the measures that we've taken so far do have a disproportionate impact on Māori and Pacific children. And you can see why, because they are overrepresented in our poverty statistics.
But Jacinda Ardern says the pandemic will have made things worse for many whānau.
We do expect COVID to have an impact, but that's why we haven't waited for numbers to tell us that.
She pointed to the government's recently announced changes to working for families as well as increases to benefits. Stats NZ expects to release child poverty statistics for the year to June in February.
It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. US health authorities say they'll fast-track the approval of a vaccine to specifically treat the Omicron variant of COVID-19. It's been found in almost 40 countries. In the US, it's spread to at least 15 states. Drug maker Moderna says it could have an altered version of its vaccine targeting the variant within 60 to 100 days. The ABC's Catherine Diss has more.
Winter is coming and so are coronavirus cases. New infections are again above 100,000 a day in America, a 20% jump over the past 2 weeks. And now the country is also dealing with the Omicron variant. Chief Medical Advisor to the President, Dr. Anthony Fauci on CNN.
The question for us here in the United States, now that it is clearly here, is what is it going to be as it competes with the very dominant variant Delta?
While 99.9% of new reported cases here are the Delta strain, 1/3 of all states have now identified Omicron. Until scientists know more about how effective current vaccines are to treating it, Dr. Fauci is urging Americans to get a booster shot, saying there's evidence they still prevent severe illness.
With Delta, when you get a level of antibody and general immune protection high enough, it spills over to protect against other variants. And that's the reason why we're saying, even with a new variant like Omicron, if you get boosted, you're going to get your level up, way up, and we feel certain that there will be some degree, and maybe a considerable degree, of protection.
And the advice appears to be sinking in. In a single day last week, 2.2 million Americans received a COVID-19 vaccine dose. Experts say they'll know more about how resistant the new strain is to vaccines in about a week, but drug makers are already preparing to roll out another booster shot to specifically target the new threat. Moderna Chief Executive Noba Afrayan was speaking on CNN.
There are many variations in the very binding region, and we have not seen that before. But it does not mean that the way our immune system will respond will not be adequate. And in fact, we suspect that we will see protection against the more severe hospitalization, death.
He says the company is working on 3 plans of attack.
1, we can boost with a higher dose. Our technology allows us to do that. We're trying a couple of what's called multivariant antigens. That's never been tried before. That is, show the body a couple of different versions of the virus and see if that breadth of antibodies can protect us. And then ultimately, we're also, as a final defense measure, developing an Omicron-specific spike, which will take a good 60 to 100 days to be ready to be deployed.
If a new vaccine proves to be the most effective weapon, the Centres for Disease Control and Prevention is already prepared. CDC Director Rochelle Lewinsky speaking on ABC.
FDA will move swiftly and CDC will move swiftly right thereafter.
It was only a matter of time before the new strain spread here. While countries around the globe are shutting down or contemplating it, the US is again relying on science and goodwill.
To the UK, where the latest changes for incoming travellers have been slammed by the travel industry, who warn it'll be devastating. From Wednesday, travellers will have to show proof of a negative PCR or lateral flow test, taken no earlier than 48 hours before departing for the UK. The government says the changes are necessary due to the rise in new cases because of the Omicron variant. The BBC's Katie Prescott has more.
Happy memories of holidays gone by. Dennis and his partner were looking forward to many more smiling pictures. But because of the changes to travel rules, he's thinking of cancelling their upcoming trip to Tenerife.
A lot of it is the uncertainty as well. Do you go on holiday and something changes dramatically again? And my partner, she would have to self-isolate on the way back for 4 days, and that's a 4 days loss of pay. She doesn't get paid.
And it's those sorts of concerns that are worrying the travel industry.
We believe that this will be a significant setback for demand this winter, real impacts on Christmas. I think we'll see people now cancelling or postponing travel plans. And for a sector that hasn't had any revenue for 18 months, give or take a few months over the summer period, it's really significant indeed. The airlines do not make money in the winter, and so we've got a really difficult stretch ahead of us now.
At London's Heathrow Airport this morning, travellers were pragmatic about the new testing requirements.
Yeah, that obviously definitely adds some inconvenience to my journey, but I totally understand it.
I used to do that anyway, just to come back to be safe. So I think it's a good way to go about it. If it means we avoid a lockdown, definitely worth doing a test. Literally, no skin off anyone's back to just get tested.
Maybe if we were a bigger family, it would have been more of a concern, but right now it's more of like a cost versus safety thing.
Many of the people travelling from London St Pancras to Europe today will have to take a test when they come home. The big question, though, is how much these changes will stop people travelling, especially over the Christmas period, a time, of course, when people do tend to move around to see their friends and family, because perhaps of the uncertainty involved and the cost. The Deputy Prime Minister says it's better to be safe than sorry.
I think, though, that the worst thing would be to then lurch, having not taken incremental steps that can make a difference, even if it's only at the margins. I think we want to make sure we take those steps earlier, precisely to avoid the bigger disruption to travel and the economy.
The measures will be looked at again in 3 weeks' time.
A giant of the US Senate and a 1996 Republican presidential nominee, Bob Dole, has died at the age of 98. He died in his sleep after announcing he was being treated for advanced lung cancer in February. His American journey took him from the plains of Kansas to the battlefield of World War II and Capitol Hill. As CNN's Wolf Blitzer reports, there he became one of the most powerful politicians of the 20th century.
Bob Dole was the kind of politician you'll have a hard time finding in Washington these days. Much of the country only saw the cartoon image, Hatchet Man.
Senator Dole has richly earned his reputation as a hatchet man tonight.
Sharp-tongued partisan.
I used election promise from my opponent.
Pundits who didn't know better labeled him mean-spirited, but the man wasn't defined by grouchiness or gridlock. In the Senate, where he spent the bulk of his political life, Dole became a master at forging compromise, working with Democrats to cobble together bills that left the country better off. A food stamp bill with George McGovern, the Americans with Disabilities Act with Tom Harkin, Social Security reform with Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Some might find this surprising, given the view that Congress has been my life. But that is not so. With all due respect to Congress, America has been my life.
He also was a driving force behind Washington's magnificent World War II memorial.
I've sort of become the unofficial greeter. I try to greet every group. I can't explain the emotion and what it means to one of these 85, 90, 95-year-old veterans who get a chance to touch and feel the World War II memorial. It's probably the best thing that's happened to them in years, and they're going to remember it the rest of their life.
Dole was one of those young Americans who went off to the war. On a hillside in Italy, an explosion severely damaged his shoulder and spinal cord. Dole spent 39 months in hospitals, hovering near death more than once.
First, I didn't think it was fair. Then I looked around in the next bed, and they were taking somebody away who had passed away, or somebody had lost both legs or done something else. So I didn't feel so sorry for myself.
His right hand remained virtually useless for the rest of his life. His mind, however, was fine. Voters in his home state of Kansas sent Dole to Washington for 5 terms, where he thrived, becoming a Republican leader in the Senate. He was President Gerald Ford's running mate in 1976 and ran for president in 1980 and 1988, finally winning the Republican nomination in 1996.
William Jefferson Clinton has a job for 4 more years.
It didn't work out.
It's a lot more fun winning. It hurts to lose an election, but stay involved and keep fighting the good fight.
A 45-year political career was over. Dole moved on with grace.
Great Senator Bob Dole.
After the bitter 2016 primaries, Dole was the only former Republican presidential nominee to attend the convention that nominated Donald Trump. He poignantly saluted the casket of fellow Republican but frequent rival George Bush. And to the end, Dole kept the trademark humor so familiar to those who knew him and so surprising to those who did not.
We always tried to have a little fun. My view is if it's not any fun, it's not worth doing. You look at your life and on reflection, I think success and failure are not opposites. It's just part of your life.
In Berlin, techno music DJs are calling on the UN cultural organisation, UNESCO, to give their music heritage status. A group calling themselves Rave the Planet are lobbying the German authorities to apply for what is called intangible cultural heritage recognition. The BBC's Valley Fontaine reports.
Berlin is well known for its nightlife, being the home of electronic music, with venues such as Tresor and Bernheim. But over the last few years, clubs in many cities across the world have been forced to close because the land they were built on has become attractive to developers, and more recently because of COVID. Techno emerged in Detroit in the mid-1980s, and when the Berlin Wall fell, many Berliners adopted the music as their soundtrack to reunification. The now abandoned factories and power plants in what was East Germany became a location for clubbers enjoying their newfound freedoms. The campaign for World Heritage status has been started by a group called Rave the Planet, who were formed by Matthias Rowing, more commonly known as Dr. Motti, the DJ behind Love Parade. So far, intangible cultural heritage status has been granted to activities like Slovakian bagpipe culture, Jamaican reggae and India's Kumbh Mela Festival. UNESCO recognition for techno would not only open up possible government funding and protection against town planners, but it would also give techno a cultural status its founders would probably never have dreamed of.
OK, some of your feedback before we head off. Let's start with the National Party. This person says, interesting comment from Chris Luxon. He said his MPs have got to oppose the government. Really? Is that what we want as a country, to oppose for the sake of it? Another person, Maureen's got in touch to say, heaven forbid, if Luxon becomes Prime Minister, he wants to give beneficiaries a hard time without support of any kind. Old Tory values we thought we'd left behind with English and key. Pity poor Kiwis should the present tables turn. And Steve says, Steve's asking why I even bothered to ask people about Luxon's lineup. Steve says, I don't understand why that even makes the news. National are roaming in the political wilderness, unlikely to find their way out, and I fully expect them to remain there. And this was a common theme in your feedback. You're really concerned about the position for the science and technology portfolio, which is held by Judith Collins, who's number 19 in the rankings of 20. And this listener says it's concerning about the lowly position for science and technology and its description as a minor portfolio in the Luxon lineup. Science and technology should be up there with finance. Vaccination passes, this person says Bunnings and Kaikoi today. COVID pass not required, not requested. Wake up, Northland. Retail, you don't have to show your COVID pass, your COVID certificate. You've got to sign in with your QR code, but you don't necessarily have to show it. Another person says, wow, it's pretty dubious that people are charging for printed vaccine passes. Apart from the odious nature of charging for the service, one has to ask why it needs to be printed in colour. As a PDF, it shows up in black and white. It sounds like a complete rort to me, and shame on that pharmacy, they say. First up, tomorrow, 5 a.m, they speak to a Newmarket retailer who says she'll be permanently closed on Saturdays from now on after intimidating behaviour over anti-mandate protesters over the weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The COVID-19 fully vaccinated rate is tracking to reach a nationwide average of 90% by the middle of next week. The Prime Minister says the clinical trials of COVID-19 antiviral drugs the government has bought are promising, with an 89% reduction in hospitalisation and death. National leader Christopher Luxon says he expects